The most powerful empire the world had ever seen collapsed. Not slowly, not peacefully, but from the inside. No single invasion, no single disaster, no single moment. Just a series of decisions, mistakes, and patterns. And here's the unsettling part. Some of those same patterns are happening again today. At its peak, the Roman Empire controlled nearly 1/4 of the world's population. Its roads stretched across continents. Its armies were unstoppable. Its influence shaped the modern world. So how does something that powerful fall? To understand the collapse, we first need to understand how Rome became unstoppable. Rome didn't begin as an empire. It started as a small city-state on the banks of the Tiber River, surrounded by rivals, outnumbered, unremarkable. But Rome had something others didn't. Adaptability. Where others relied on tradition, Rome learned, borrowed, and improved. They studied their enemies, copied their strengths, and eliminated their weaknesses. This made them dangerous, very dangerous. The Roman military machine. Rome's greatest weapon wasn't just its soldiers, it was its system. The Roman army was disciplined, organized, and brutally efficient. Every soldier trained the same way. Every unit moved like a machine. Every battle followed calculated strategy, not emotion. They built roads, not just for trade, but for war. They built forts, not just for defense, but for control. Rome didn't just fight wars, it engineered victories. Smart expansion strategy. Unlike many conquerors, Rome didn't just destroy its enemies, it absorbed them. When Rome conquered a region, it often allowed local leaders to remain, gave people partial rights, integrated cultures instead of erasing them. This created something powerful. Loyalty. People didn't just fear Rome, many became part of it. And that's how Rome grew, not just larger, but stronger. Infrastructure equals control. Rome understood something most civilizations didn't. Power isn't just about armies, it's about systems. They built roads connecting vast territories, aqueducts bringing water into cities, cities designed for efficiency and control. This made Rome stable, predictable, connected, and nearly impossible to break from the outside. As Rome expanded, it transformed from a republic into an empire. And with that shift came absolute power. The rise of emperors. Leaders like Julius Caesar changed everything. He didn't just lead armies. He reshaped Rome itself. After him came emperors like Augustus, Trajan, Marcus Aurelius. Under their rule, Rome reached its golden age, peak of the empire. At its height, Rome controlled most of Europe, North Africa, parts of the Middle East. It wasn't just large, it was dominant. Trade flourished, cities thrived, culture spread. Latin became the language of power. Roman law shaped justice systems. Architecture defined greatness. Everything pointed to one conclusion: Rome was unstoppable. But beneath all that power, something was changing. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. The systems that made Rome strong were beginning to crack. Not from enemies, but from within. The first warning signs. Success created new problems. Wealth inequality started growing. Political corruption increased. Power struggles became common. And perhaps most dangerously, Rome began to believe in its own invincibility. History shows us something important. No empire falls at its weakest. It falls when it thinks it's strongest. Rome had everything: power, wealth, control. But the real threat wasn't outside its borders. It was already inside, growing, spreading. And in the next part, we'll uncover the hidden cracks that started breaking the Roman Empire apart, one decision at a time. Rome had everything: power, wealth, control. It dominated continents, influenced millions, and looked completely unbreakable. But history has a pattern. The bigger the empire, the harder the fall. And for Rome, the fall didn't begin with war. It began with decay from within. Empires don't collapse overnight. They weaken slowly, quietly, over time. And Rome's first major problem? Too much success. Economic inequality. As Rome expanded, wealth poured in. Gold, silver, resources, slaves. But that wealth didn't reach everyone. It concentrated at the top. The elite became richer than ever, while ordinary citizens struggled to survive. Small farmers, once the backbone of Rome, lost their land. Why? Because wealthy elites bought massive estates and used slave labor instead. This created a dangerous imbalance. The rich got richer. The poor got poorer. The middle class disappeared. And when that happens, stability starts to break. Political corruption and power struggles. Rome's political system, once its greatest strength, began to rot. Positions of power were no longer earned. They were bought, manipulated, or taken by force. Corruption spread through the Senate. Leaders stopped serving Rome and started serving themselves. Ambition turned into greed, and greed turned into chaos. Civil wars, Rome versus itself, instead of fighting external enemies. Rome began fighting internally. Generals turned against each other. Armies loyal to leaders, not the state. One of the biggest turning points came after Julius Caesar was assassinated. That single event triggered years of civil war. Rome wasn't just unstable anymore. It was divided. And division is deadly for any civilization. As instability grew, the economy began to crumble. And this is where things get dangerously familiar. Even today, currency devaluation. Rome needed money to fund wars, to maintain its empire, to satisfy growing demands. So what did they do? They started reducing the silver content in their coins. In simple terms, they printed money. At first it worked, but over time, inflation exploded. Prices skyrocketed, savings lost value, trust in the system disappeared. And when people lose trust in money, the entire economy starts collapsing. Trade breakdown. Rome's massive trade network was one of its greatest strengths. But as instability increased, trade routes became unsafe. Merchants stopped traveling. Goods became scarce. Prices went even higher. Cities that once thrived started declining. Heavy taxes and pressure on citizens. To fix the crisis, the government did what many failing systems do. They increased taxes heavily. Farmers, workers, and small citizens suffered the most. Many couldn't survive. Some abandoned their land. Others fled cities entirely. The result? Less production, less food, less economic activity, which made the crisis even worse. Rome's army built the empire. But now, it was becoming a liability. Decline in Roman soldiers. At one point, serving in the Roman army was an honor. Citizens proudly defended their empire. But over time, that changed. Fewer Romans wanted to join the military. Why? Economic struggles, loss of national pride, political instability. So Rome made a risky decision, hiring foreign mercenaries instead of Roman citizens. They started hiring outsiders, foreign soldiers, mercenaries. At first, it solved the problem, but it created a much bigger one. These soldiers weren't loyal to Rome. They were loyal to money. And when loyalty disappears, control disappears. The breaking point. Some of these foreign troops eventually turned against Rome itself. They knew its weaknesses, they understood its defenses, and they had no emotional connection to protect it. Rome had built an empire so large, it could no longer defend itself properly. By this point, Rome was facing economic collapse, political corruption, military weakness, social division. But here's what's important. None of these problems were sudden. They built up over time, ignored, dismissed, normalized, until it was too late. And this is where things get uncomfortable. Because these patterns aren't unique to Rome. They've appeared in multiple civilizations across history. And in some ways, we can still see echoes of them today. Rome wasn't destroyed in a single moment. It was weakened, piece by piece. And now, it was vulnerable. In the next part, we'll witness the final stage, the invasions, the scoot, and the moment Rome finally collapsed. Rome was no longer the unstoppable empire it once was. It was weakened, divided, and struggling to hold itself together. The cracks had formed, the systems were breaking, and now, the outside world noticed. For centuries, Rome had been the hunter. Now it was becoming the prey. Barbarian tribes from beyond the empire's borders began testing its strength. Not one group, but many. Constant pressure from all directions. The Visigoths and first major shock. One of the most significant early threats came from the Visigoths. They weren't initially trying to destroy Rome. They were trying to survive, pushed by hunger, migration pressures, and conflict with other tribes. They entered Roman territory seeking refuge, but Rome mishandled the situation. Bad decisions, broken agreements, mistreatment of refugees, and eventually, peace turned into war. The unthinkable moment. Rome is sacked. In 410 AD, something happened that shocked the entire world. Rome, the eternal city, was attacked and looted. For the first time in centuries, the heart of the empire was violated by the Visigoths under Alaric I. The message was clear. Rome was no longer untouchable. After the sack of Rome, fear spread across the empire. Confidence collapsed, and once confidence breaks in an empire, everything else follows. Leadership instability. Emperors came and went rapidly. Some ruled for months, some for weeks. Some never even had real control. Power became unstable, and instability creates confusion. Armies didn't know who to follow. Citizens didn't know who to trust. Provinces started acting independently. Rome was still alive, but barely functioning as a single system. Military fragmentation. The Roman army, once unified and disciplined, was now fragmented. Different generals controlled different regions. Some fought for Rome, some fought for themselves, and some switched sides entirely. This is one of the clearest signs of imperial collapse. When the army stops serving the state and starts serving itself, cities decline. Across the empire, as instability grew, trade routes collapsed, cities lost population, infrastructure was abandoned. Rome's great roads still existed, but fewer people used them. Aqueducts still stood, but maintenance stopped. The empire still looked powerful on the surface, but inside, it was hollowing out. By this point, Rome was no longer one empire in practice. It was many broken pieces, pretending to be one system, and pressure from outside only accelerated the collapse. The rise of multiple invasions. Different groups entered Roman territory: Goths, Vandals, Franks, Huns, each pushing deeper into weakened regions. Rome couldn't respond effectively because its strength had already been drained internally. The Huns and the fear factor. One of the most feared groups were the Huns under Attila the Hun. Even the idea of their army approaching caused panic. But the truth was, Rome wasn't falling because of Attila alone. It was falling because it was already weak. External pressure only revealed the damage inside. By the 5th century, Rome was barely recognizable. The Western Roman Empire was politically fragmented, economically weakened. Militarily unstable emperors had almost no real power. Control had shifted to regional commanders and foreign leaders. Rome existed in name, but not in strength. At this point, historians ask a critical question: was Rome destroyed by invasions, or did it collapse long before the invasions ever succeeded? Because every external attack only worked after internal stability was already gone. Rome's foundation was gone. Its systems were broken. Its identity was fading. And now, only one final moment remained: the official end of the Western Roman Empire. In the final part, we'll see the last emperor, the symbolic end of Rome, and what lessons this collapse leaves for the modern world. Rome was no longer an empire in the true sense. It was a shadow of what it once was. Centuries of dominance, reduced to fragmented control. The world that once revolved around Rome had moved on. And now, the final chapter was about to close. By the year 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire was barely functional. Real power wasn't in the hands of emperors anymore. It was in the hands of generals and foreign commanders. And the last emperor was only a symbol. That emperor was Romulus Augustulus, a boy placed on the throne, too young to rule, too weak to control an empire already collapsing. The end didn't come with a dramatic final battle. It came quietly. A Germanic leader named Odoacer entered Rome's political center. He didn't destroy the empire. He simply removed the emperor. And that was it. No more Western Roman emperor. No more unified Western Empire. Just fragments of what once was. But here's something important most people don't realize. Rome didn't completely vanish overnight. It transformed. Its eastern half continued as the Byzantine Empire. Its laws influenced modern governments. Its architecture shaped cities across the world. Its language evolved into modern European languages. Even today, we live in systems Rome helped build. So what actually caused the collapse? Not just invasions, not just corruption, not just economics. It was a combination of all of them. But more importantly, failure to adapt in time. Rome became too large to manage, too complex to control, too confident to change. And when problems appeared, they were delayed, ignored, or underestimated, until they became unstoppable. And this is why Rome still matters today. Because the patterns are not gone. They are repeated throughout history. Economic imbalance, political instability, loss of unity, overexpansion, internal division. Civilizations don't fall because enemies are strong. They fall because they become vulnerable from within. Rome wasn't just a place. It was an idea of power, of order, of permanence. But history teaches one simple truth. Nothing is permanent. Not even the greatest empire the world has ever seen. So the question isn't just, how did Rome fall? The real question is, are we paying attention to the same patterns today? Because history doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it often rhymes. And Rome is the most powerful rhyme of all. If this story made you think differently about history, subscribe to Legacy of Civilizations, because the past is never really gone. It's just waiting to be understood.